So having connected to a database and run a first SQL query, show tables, to show all the tables in that database, we're now going to run a different SQL query, and this time we're going to look at each table in the database, or a table in the database, and find out how many rows that table has, or how many records there are in that particular table. So that's quite useful in terms of knowing whether we're dealing with a very large database or quite a small database. So as we've run our execute query function before, in a cell above this in a Colab notebook, we can just run that execute query again. So the database is already connected, the execute query function is already defined, we can now just kind of use it. So this time we're going to count the number of rows in, let's count the right number of rows in the sales table. So we're going to make a variable called sales count, because that's what we're looking for, and that's the result of our execute query in there. So execute query we're going to run, and in the brackets we're going to put the query, the SQL query. So the one we need to use this time is select count. Now, most SQL queries are getting data, so if we're querying the database to try and get some data from it, we will more often than not use the word select. So select is to select data from the database. In this case, we're going to select a function called count that is going to count all the rows in a table that we give it. So we're going to select the count of rows from the table, and the table in this case is called sales. So we're going to run that query, and we'll might as well print sales count so that we can see what the results are. So let's run that and see what happens. Okay, so it has run, and it's telling us that there are 6,715,221 rows in this table. So what that tells us initially is that to read all the data from that table probably is going to take quite a long time, and we probably don't want to do that in a Colab notebook, or even in a Python function where it's echoing it to the screen. We don't want 6 million lines of data on the screen. So we will limit the amount of data that we read every time we read from this database.